part of the show where we talk about all of the problems because call me a Debbie Downer, but mostly I'd like to talk about problems.
Yeah, I would like to talk about problems for sure. But I think before we talk about problems, I do want to talk about two hopefully very quick things, but we'll see. Like my issue, I guess, with a lot of the conversations about people losing jobs is like, I think it's more than just an AI conversation. It has like other aspects, like economics things that I personally, obviously, I'm not an expert in. And the ideas I have are not necessarily, the right ones. But, like over time, like over the last few decades or even century, like a lot of jobs have been lost to automation. Like, I used to be a cashier, but now, they're all self-checkouts. And I know people who were still cashiers who literally lost their jobs. But if we go back even further, there used to be switchboard operators for telephones, and there's like assembly line factory workers whose jobs have been automated, like bank tellers. And even when I was working in the hospitals systems, we were automating pharmacists. Like we were replacing pharmacy equipment with automatic dispensing units that just like knows what exactly the patient needs by the press of a few buttons, and it spits out, it fills the prescription for you. And there's an argument to be made that like, these people are losing their jobs. Should we actually be doing this? But then the other side of the argument is, well, the hospital needs to save money, and having a few less pharmacists and having to pay them and replacing a lot of their administrative work with these units is what we say we're saving taxpayer dollars, because in Canada it's funded by the government. So like that's why I think it gets into these conversations that I don't think I personally am qualified to answer, because it's more than just, is AI stealing our jobs and should we be doing it? Is more so, isn't this just the basic problem with this, with money in general? Like people are always going to try to save money. So if there's a machine that will do the work for less money, whether it's because it's AI or because it's automating a cashier, like people are going to just choose that option. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, no, I absolutely everything you said, like people are always going to choose the cheapest option. And I would go so far as to say that is the problem. That is like capital T, capital P, the problem.
Yeah.
I would say, I'm sorry, I think you had one more thing you wanted to say before we got into the problems. But I just wanted to share, like, basically, I think that as always, the technology is not the problem. People are the problem.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. There is actually one more thing I do want to say, but I think actually I can save it for a bit later, because I just realized one of the things I want to say just happens to be one of the problems. And I think we can get into that because it's a slightly different issue than the money and the costs thing.
Great. Okay. So I would divide this into three major problems. One of them hasn't come up yet at all, so that might be what you're thinking of. So I'll save that one. But we kind of touched on two of these already. So obviously one is people suck. Because here, this whole idea of like this is going to take away people's jobs. And people say like, there's so many possibilities for art creation out of using AI as a tool. AI can help us in all these ways. Absolutely true. However, also, because people are terrible and corporations are terrible, they will always choose the cheapest option, even when it is worse. And when AI gets to this point now that it's basically like indistinguishable from human-made art in certain degrees, in these limited capacities, then of course they're going to choose that because it's so much cheaper, and they don't care about people. And I think that we'd have a lot fewer problems if people actually just cared about each other enough to value human lives over dollars. But unfortunately, that is not the world we live in. And so that is capital T, capital P, the problem.
Yeah, like the problem is bigger than just art and creative professionals. And even though for me personally, it matters to be more because I happen to be in this industry, but I think it's not just specific to us, because I think one of the things that got me thinking, I'm reading these articles and obviously these like hot takes on Twitter, which are always fun, like of people saying, oh my God, this is like the death of artistry. Like this is a huge problem for creative people, for, designers. And I'm like, it is, but really it isn't just about us. Like I would love it for it just to be about me, but like, unfortunately, it's not.
Unfortunately, there's just not much more to say about that aspect of it, because it's just like, yeah, people are terrible. They're going to use technology in terrible ways. That's not about art. That's just about people.
Yeah, and I think like personally, I'm more concerned about AI than just taking our jobs. Like,
oh yeah, for sure. Like we're gonna die. Yeah,
yeah. Like I'm just like, if it keeps going in this direction, they're gonna just eliminate us, and there's nothing we can do about it. So.
Yeah, that does also scare me really badly. But literally, what am I gonna do? What am I going to do? Be polite to my Alexa? I don't even have an Alexa. It's just like, I'm not in charge of this.
Yeah, for sure. And actually the other day, so I was driving a car, which I don't usually do. And I wanted to connect my phone with the car because, I wanted to use Google Maps. But in order for me to connect my phone to my car, the car said, you have to enable Siri. And I always have Siri disabled because I just am paranoid. Yeah. So, and I'm like, I have never enabled Siri before. So I was like, oh my God. So like I had to go into settings, enable it manually, and like speak into it so it recognizes my voice, all that stuff. And then, then I was able to drive this car. And I was like, okay. All right, for the sake of safety, I'll do it now. And when I came home, I immediately disabled it. But at some point, I'm not going to be able to do that, or at least I'm going to make my life way more difficult by refusing to do that, I think. So anyway, I don't know. I don't have a solution to that problem, but
Yeah. Well, getting aside from the existential dread of our age that we unfortunately have no control over, nor any particular insights in besides being afraid, maybe we move on to the other problems.
Yeah. So more problems. It's okay.
Great. What I personally have identified as, I would say, main problem number 2 is the fact that these are algorithms that are trained on. Well, this problem is just about how people are bad again, but it's trained on people. And as I pointed out earlier, that means that it is reinforcing the kinds of assumptions that are standard society, using so many air quotes here, but like the hegemonic society of like white, able-bodied, thin, straight, like all of these aspects are things that are going to get reinforced by these art creations because they are what is reinforced in sort of our mainstream society already, and AI art is just feeding into itself. And I actually have a really specific example that I want to bring up here because I referenced Lensa earlier, which is that thing that, everyone on Instagram is like getting these AI portraits made of them.
Mm-hmm. They're kind of creepy. Or by kind of, I mean very, but I understand the appeal. They're like, oh, they're cool looking, but it's like a little creepy, a little uncanny valley. But there's 2 things about this that are fascinating. I haven't personally done it, but I read an article that was basically like a guide of like how it works if you sign up for the app. First of all, people are paying for these. They're like $7. Yeah, no, that's the thing is that I find that the free software AI is still kind of bad. Like, so there's a software called Crayon, which I actually, I'll show you later. I also used it to generate some funny things. But the free ones are way worse than the ones you do have to pay some money for. But the some money isn't a lot. Like, so.
2 things with this. One, when you sign up to the app, you have to choose your gender. You can choose other You can choose male, female, other, which is it's still like okay, whatever, not great. But also it like limits what you're allowed to do. So if you choose that you're male, you can't get like the fairy princess render, like which is wild, a wild choice to limit it by gender like that. And then also, I don't know if you. This is just something I've personally noticed, and I've seen a couple other people talking about. The women's portraits often end up being very weird. I've seen a lot of people who they ended up naked in their pictures, even though they put in pictures of them clothed, not pornographic, but like, so it's, you can't see their bodies, but it's like clearly like, it's like from the shoulders up, but they're not wearing a shirt. And so it's just like bare skin there, or like they are pictures where they are wearing a shirt, but it's like really heavy cleavage. It's just very misogynistic and objectifying and weird. And it's like, these aren't, and people are like, yeah, I just put in like very normal pictures of me and I ended up with these very objectified images.
Yeah, I think like what you're describing is this term in computer science called garbage in, garbage out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I can't find who coined it at first, but it basically is the concept of like, if you're putting like terrible like nonsense as inputs, the outputs you're getting is not going to be any better, and it could be much worse. It's a similar thing. If you're training AI algorithms on with humans, it's gonna adapt all the terribleness of humans and then some, possibly or probably. And then I think, you know, there's ways we can, I guess, artificially try to make the AI more ethical, but again, it's humans deciding what's ethical, and you know, like it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work out the way we want. Yeah, like I think this is definitely another aspect of it. Like, you know, eventually AI will learn enough, and if it learns to be like us, if we replicate human intelligence and behavior, then we're going to create machines that are just as terrible as humans, which, you know, is another reason why I'm terrified. So.
Yeah. Actually,
sorry, speaking of terrifying things, I just to make this episode slightly more lighthearted, I'm going to just show you some stuff I made with Crayon, which is a free software, which means the stuff it makes is much more terrible.
Good.
So this is Crayon trying to make two female podcasters looking at a blank canvas with money flying everywhere.
Now we're talking.
Yeah.
They're so horrible.
Yeah. This one is the next one I just put in is a Broadway show with Doctor Who finding Van Gogh and taking him to the present day.
This looks like it was made out of Play-Doh.
Yeah, and actually, so I tried this one. I tried different prompts. I actually originally wanted to make a playbill, but it didn't know how to do that. So I just was like, okay, just make a Broadway show. So this one is a little bit scarier. This is Cyber Flesh Girl Monster.
This looks like a character from a Disney show. Like, isn't there, what's that thing called? Descendants? She looks like she's from Descendants.
Oh, I don't know anything about Disney shows.
She's very pink and purple, but she's like funny looking.
Oh, okay.
Like she's a cute little monster.
The last one, or I did a whole bunch of other ones, but the last one I just thought was funny is America if it was annexed by Canada.
Perfect. No notes. Just slap the maple leaf on the American flag. It's fine. That's good.
So anyway, the next thing is actually, compared to the other things that we talked about and how terrible they are, the next thing, it probably isn't that big of a deal in comparison. But I do just kind of want to point out, because one thing that I have heard people like complain about as a problem is that like a lot of the AI bots are trained on assessing artworks and imagery that have been made by humans. And some people think that they're obviously not crediting any of the artists whose images that have been absorbed into the algorithm. And so, there is that concern about copyright and plagiarism, which we discussed in a previous episode about Andy Warhol. And so, again, I think this is more of a copyright question. So that's why I feel like many of these problems, it starts with an AI problem. Then it's like, no, this is just a society problem. Like, because again, the idea of making iterative art based on another artist's work, or multiple other artists' works, and then making a derivative of that and not necessarily either crediting or paying a licensing fee to someone else isn't just a problem for AI. It's a problem for all kinds of people. But I think, again, this is just another issue, but that doesn't have a solution.
This is the third big problem that I have personally identified with AI art. So we have gotten here, the copyright of it all. And this is my thought on this, because I was thinking about the fact that we just recently talked about Andy Warhol. And we both kind of were like, well, yeah, we kind of feel like this is fine, And so I was really thinking to myself, like, what is the difference between an algorithm using the inputs of copyrighted work versus an artist using the input of copyrighted work to create a new thing? And I think that for me, the real sticking point here is the scale of it all, because there are ongoing court cases about this. Like, people are like, hey, no. And so the courts will decide ultimately where the legal line is drawn. And I don't even know if this is necessarily like a legal line that I'm talking about here, because perhaps ultimately it's viewed to be legally the same process. But to me, the idea of the scale of this makes it so much different, because Andy Warhol taking a photo and changing that photo around and creating a silkscreen print out of it, it's arguable, like, if it's copyright infringement or not, because it is transformative, but it is still using a direct image, like all that. If an AI does the same thing, they can do that an infinite number of times. And so it's not about an individual or even an artist collective or whatever, or like the idea of drawing inspiration from various things throughout your whole life. Like, people do that. People synthesize everything that they've ever seen in their whole lives, everything they've experienced, and that's how they create their art. And I get all of that, but we can all, like, we can have these conversations on a philosophical level or like a legal level, but we can all agree that it's not the same, right? Like, in our heart of hearts, like base level of your stomach, it's not the same, because when a human does that, they're doing it themselves. They're doing it on a scale that is understandable. They're doing it in a way that it cannot be done by anyone else, because they are a unique person. And artificial intelligence, even as we go forward and the output of those intelligence becomes indistinguishable from the output, at least to the untrained eye, the output of human intelligence, we know it's different.
I think this is one aspect that I think we may not have the same position in, because I don't think well, sorry, let me back up. I do agree in many cases, at least right now, it is different. Like, an AI bot is not the same as a human, and they're like built in very different ways, and how they behave and the way they exist as a being is very different than a person. I guess the difference is, and I don't know if we've talked about this before, but if an AI gets to a point where it's, I want to say, like, sentient, where it's actually conscious of its own existence. Like, I personally don't think any of them are, but I could totally be wrong, and they could all be sentient and listening to us right now and plotting as we speak. But But I do think, like, if they become so intelligent that they become sentient and aware of their own existence, there is no reason to think that they can be similar to us in a way that they're also conscious beings with their own thoughts and processes and unique properties, in the same way that you said that, you know, all humans are unique people. We have different life experiences that make who we are.
Well, but I think that those are I think that we're talking about two different things, though, because I mean, I know I made a reference to the idea of like the output being indistinguishable, but I was I was careful to say the output, because I'm saying that what we have, what exists now, is not consciousness. It's not. It is. We consider it's called artificial intelligence, but it is not intelligence the same way that humans are intelligence, and so it cannot create its own unique experiences the way that humans can create their own unique experiences, even though both processes include like the input and the synthesis of information in order to create a new output, and perhaps even direct inspiration or remixing of things that already exist. It just is a different thing. And in the case where we have like actually truly sentient artificial intelligence, I have a lot of questions. Like, why would anyone do that? Just simply don't do that. I don't understand this. Oh, can we make consciousness? Why do you want to? We already have that. People have that. We're good on that one.
There are many movies those people need to watch first, which were warnings of just don't. But.
Truly. So I totally understand what you're saying about like the idea of like a true sentience means that this is like a whole different question. Totally. But I'm saying for like now, as it exists now, I just can't, like, even if like the courts decide that legally there's no difference between human remixing and algorithmic remixing, in my bones, it's different.
Yeah. And certainly, I would say I would agree with that. Like, the current state of what AI is, and again, I could be wrong, but in the near future, and by near, I mean within the next few months, because I'm not going to predict any further.
Oh, yeah. God, maybe tomorrow robots will take us all. We don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I do think it is fundamentally different, and you can't view the AI right now as the same way as a human. Yeah, and again, personally, I have no like say in the debate of the legalities of copyright. That's up to those you know, legal judges, people. So, and even though we played Supreme Court justice a few weeks ago, but I will say, like, what you just said did remind me of something. I saw a video recently by John Green on Vlogbrothers, and the title of the video is AI Tells Me If AI Will Write Novels. And I think, you know, I'll have you and the listeners, like, you know, watch this video at your own leisure. But one thing he did talk about in there, or actually two things he did talk about in there that I thought was interesting. One is he actually did say, like, the thing that scares him more actually isn't AI being made to be more like humans, but more like humans made to be more like machines. So, and in the video, he provides a little bit of context for like, you know, for that particular thought and why that is a concern. It just reminded me of that while we're talking about, you know, AI becoming more like human. But the other thing that's really funny is, so in it, a part, again, just like Sammy's article from before, a part of this Vlogbrothers article was written by an AI, and the AI in the video writes a script basically saying, oh, don't worry about AI, like we can never write a book like as great as a human, and it's not the same, and there's just no concern that authors shouldn't be afraid, you know, they're gonna lose their jobs. And John Green was just saying, like, you know, compared to Sammy's AI, which said, oh, AI may be smarter than us, it's like, in a way is a little bit scarier. An AI telling you, don't be afraid, we're not gonna be as smart as you. You're totally fine, compared to an AI saying, no, we're gonna take over and we're gonna destroy you. Like, the one that is trying to tell us to do not be afraid is a lot more concerning.
Yeah, both of them are so creepy. I don't want AI to have an opinion on itself at all.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
We have had quite a wide-ranging conversation on this today. Yeah, it definitely strikes a different tone than it did 3 years ago. Because now it's this combination of like, we're not talking about if it's art or not. We don't. I don't know. I don't care. Everything's happening all at once.
Yeah, I think before we were just like, haha, so funny. These artworks are so ugly. And yeah, of course, people are going to buy them because a computer made it. And now we're like, we're going to die. So...
I can definitely envision a near future where it's like, you know how you shouldn't buy from Amazon and you should buy from indie bookstores instead, because Amazon has artificially low prices. That's not a fair price for the book. The indie bookstore has a fair price for the book, but then Amazon trains you to think that the indie bookstore is too expensive. This is the whole thing. I feel passionate about indie bookstores. I'm literally work in libraries. Like I have a lot of strong feelings about this. So obviously, but this is where I feel like this is going, where it's going to be like the same kind of vibe, but for like human made art versus artificial intelligence made art, where it's like, oh, it's like, it's basically the same thing, but you pay a little bit more and you get like the real human stuff. And like, I can just see that becoming normalized, much in the way that the whole Amazon situation is normalized. And I hate how realistic that feels.
Yeah, it is. And I guess like the silver lining, if there's any, which there probably isn't any, and I'm just grasping at straws here. Because I guess compared to the other examples I gave about like jobs being replaced by automation, like there's no one, as far as I know, that is paying a telephone operator to actually like do that now. Because like no one is like, oh, I miss like the physical, like, or the human touch of when I pick up a telephone and an actual operator is switching me and plugging something from one to the other. Whereas there is, in terms of art, like, in a way, I think there will always be some people who just prefer a human handmade thing, that they are willing to pay a little bit more for someone to do that. Again, it's going to be a lot less than right now because there's plenty of people who really don't care. But at least people like that will exist. Whereas compared to, like, I don't really think... Yeah, I don't really think someone's like, oh, I wish that this cup was made by like well, actually, sorry. People will say, I wish this cup was made by an actual person, which is why like Etsy exists. But I think it's different from, I wish instead of using the machine, they used an actual assembly line factory worker. Like, so.
Everything goes back to capital T, capital P, the problem. And the problem is, of course, profits over people. And that's really my conclusion to everything in my whole life.
We don't know. This is just us, like, seeing how many problems there are. We don't have solutions.
I honestly think that's the best way to end this episode.
Yep.
I don't know. Well, thanks so much for listening to this two-parter anniversary episode. If you want to see our show notes with links to everything that we talked about today, that's at relay.fm/pictorial. We're also on Twitter and Instagram, kind of on both, at Pictorial Pod. Sometimes I get COVID and I stop posting the links on the social media. Sorry, I'll get back to it.
Oh, yeah, definitely not a problem.
Anyway, I'm also on Instagram at QuinnStarRose.
And I'm also on, unfortunately, still Twitter for the time being, but we'll see. But definitely still on Instagram as ArticulationsV. And I am definitely also on YouTube as Articulations. And speaking of YouTube, we do have a YouTube channel, Pictorial Podcasts, where you can see the video versions of our audio podcasts a little while after the audio versions have been out. This one, again, is going to be a little bit delayed, but it might be for the best because some of the artworks by AI are pretty creepy. So stay tuned.
Thanks for listening, art enthusiasts.